Last lesson we looked at how to add, subtract, multiply polynomials. Today we're going to look at dividing. So we're going to make sure that you can divide a polynomial by equal or lower degree using something called long division. So first problem here we're going to look at is a word problem. It says Ariana needed 140x squared plus 60x squared inches of paper to make a book jacket, and 10x book jacket that's 10x inches tall. So here's the height, and across the other one is the whole thing is the area. In figuring the area, she needs to allow for a front and back flap that is 2x inches. Okay, so there's the 2x here. And also the front and back are 6x. They want to know how wide the front and back flap should be. So what are these going to end up being here? All right, so we know that this book flap, when it's unfolded, makes a rectangle. And from last year in geometry, hopefully you remember that area of a rectangle is length times width. Okay, well we know that in this problem we're trying to solve here for the length. What's the length across this going to be? So if we do a little solving here first before we start plugging stuff in and divide by the width, it looks like the length is equal to area divided by width. So let's put in what we know here. We know in this problem that our area is this, 140x squared plus 60x. And we also know that our width is 10x. Okay, so if we divide this out, this should tell us what the length across this is going to be. And anytime you're dividing and you get a single term, which we do right here, this is called a monomial, it's a single term. That means you can just divide each term on the top by that amount. So what our length is going to be here is 140x squared, that number divided by 10x, plus 60x divided by 10x. We got to divide them both by the term on the bottom. So if we simplify this, we should know what the length is going to be. So now you got to use some of your rules that we had from last time, from the last lesson. If we divide here, divide the numbers, 140 divided by 10 is 14. X squared divided by x, when we're dividing, we want to subtract exponents. So if we subtract exponents here, 2 minus 1 is x to the first power, or x. On the second one, 60 divided by 10 is 6. And here the x's cancel out. You'd have x to the 0. So the length across this is 14x plus 6. So across this whole thing here is 14x plus 6. Now, that's not answering the question, though. They want to know what are these other flaps going to be here. So we want to set up now some other equation that we can use to solve this. So if we add up all the stuff on top here, it should equal 14x plus 6. Well, we don't know what these two are yet, but we do know what this length is. Let's figure out what this length is. So if we add all these up, 6x plus 2x plus 6x, that's a total of 14x. Okay, so if we take the total length, 14x plus 6, this is the total length, and minus this other stuff, we should be able to find out what those two flaps are going to be. So let's minus off what we have so far of 14x. Well, if we do that, 14x plus 6 minus 14x leaves us with 6. So the length between these two flaps is 6. It looks like those two flaps are equal in length, so if we do 6 divided by 2, it looks like each flap is 3 inches. So that's using some polynomial division and subtraction to solve. All right, so that type of division, if you divide a polynomial by a monomial, all you need to do is, like we did on that last problem, divide each term in the polynomial by that monomial. So looking at number 1 here, let's try that out. Each thing we want to divide here by our monomial term, our one term in the bottom of 4x. So we got to divide this term by 4x, we need to divide this 1 by 4x. And we want to divide the last one by 4x. Everything needs to get divided by that single term. All right, so here 4 divided by 4, that's going to be 1. X cubed divided by x would be x squared. On the second one, our x's cancel out here because we got 1 on top, 1 on bottom. 8 divided by 4 is 2. And on our last one here, 12 divided by 4 is 3. X squared divided by x leaves us with a single x term. And there's our answer. All right, let's try another one of those out. On number 2 here, we want to do some dividing as well. So we want to figure out what's this one going to be. So again, divide each term by the, we want to divide each thing by this 8 to the 4th b cubed here. So every term we want to divide by the same thing. Okay, so let's start with the first one. On the first one, we want to divide that out. So you can divide the numbers just like we did on the last one. And if you take 16 divided by 8, you get 2. Okay, looking at the a's now, we got 5 on top, 4 on bottom. If we subtract that, that's going to be a single a. And our b's are the same, so they just cancel out. So the first term, we get 2a. All right, now let's look at the second one. If we divide here 12 divided by 8, that if you divide that out on your calculator, you're going to get like a decimal number. It's going to be 1.5. We don't want to answer these with decimals. So we want to leave it in a fraction form. So if the number doesn't divide nicely into the other number, see if there is a smaller number that would go into both. In this case, I think 4 divides in each of these two numbers here. 4 goes into 8 2 times. 4 goes into 12 3 times. So rather than writing a decimal number, we're going to leave this as a fraction of 3 over 2. Okay, let's keep going now. Now we want to look at our variables, and our variables have exponents, so we want to subtract them here. We got 4 a's on bottom, 3 on top. If we take 4 minus 3, we get 1 left over. Because the bottom's bigger, we want to leave that 1a on the bottom. With the b's, we also have 4 and 3. If we subtract those, we also get 1b, but this time the top has more, so there's 1b left on top. So that's how we'd write that second term. All right, let's do the same thing with the third one now. 8 does not divide into 20, so let's think of a number smaller that would go into both. Again, I think 4 is the one here, so 4 goes into 8 twice. 4 goes into 20 5 times. So we're going to be left with a fraction of 5 over 2. Now let's subtract our exponents with our variables here. 4 on the bottom, 1 on top. 4 minus 1 is 3. And those 3 a's are going to be in the denominator on the bottom. And then with our b's, 5 minus 3 is 2, but there's more on top, so that's where our b's go. So that would be our answer for the second one. All right, I want you to pause the video right now, try out number 3, and see what you get here. All right, let's see what you got on the third one here. If you did this one right, divide each of them by 3xy squared. You will get, when you divide the first one, you should get 3xy left over. When you divide the middle one, all the variables cancel out, so you just get 5 when you divide the numbers. And when you divide the last one, you should get 4, and then there's 1y left over. So that's what you should get there. So monomial division, pretty easy, not much to it. What gets harder is when we start looking at ones like on your back of your sheet, like number 4, where now we're dividing by what's called a binomial because there's 2 terms here, not just 1. Okay, you can see there's a plus or minus sign with that. So when you're dividing by more than 1 term, it becomes a little bit harder. And what we're going to use to divide these is kind of what you did way back when you learned division. We're going to do long division to divide this out. Okay, now if you remember a little bit of long division, how long division works is you need to go through, and when you're dividing these, you're going to, like, let's say we wanted to do 25 something else. Let's say you want to divide 35 by 2. Okay, you write what you're dividing by out here, and in the division bar you write the number you're dividing. So if you divide something like this, what you do is you see how many times does this number go into this number. Well, 2 goes into 3 one time, so then you put a 1 up on top. And then the next thing you do is you multiply together these two things. So if you take 2 times 1, you get 2. Then you subtract to see what's left over. There would be a 1 left. Okay. The next thing you do, drop down the next number and repeat the process. So now we want to see how many times does 2 go into 15. 2 goes into 15 7 times. So then you put a 7 up here. Then you multiply again. What's 7 times 2? 14. You minus, and then whatever's left is your remainder. Okay, so if you end up with a remainder, right away you just wrote like 17 remainder 1, but then you figured out later that that's actually a fraction answer. So the answer would be 17 and 1 over whatever you're dividing by. So whatever our division number is, in this case 2, would be the denominator. So the answer is 17 and 1/2. So that's how you kind of learned how to do long division way back in like elementary school. We're going to do the same thing with polynomials here. So whatever you're dividing by, in this problem it's 2x minus 3 goes out here. Whatever you're dividing goes under the bar. Okay, now we want to go through and divide this out. So the first thing we're going to do is check what does this divide into this. So if we take 2x to the third power divided by 2x, what's left over? Well, the 2's would cancel out here. X cubed divided by x would be x squared. So that number we write on top here. There would be x squared left over if we divide that out. Okay, so the next thing, if you remember back to what we just did with long division, the next step is to multiply back. So now we want to take this x squared and times it to both of these things here. What do you get if you multiply it back to both things? So if you multiply it back to the first one, that's going to be 2x cubed. If you multiply it to the next one, it's minus 3x squared. Same thing we did on this problem. Okay, we multiplied it back. Once we multiplied it back, then what we did is subtracted it to see what's left over. So we're going to do the same thing here now. If we subtract that, what's left over? Okay, but what we got to do here is kind of subtract both things. Okay, so let's see what we get when we subtract here. If we take 2x cubed minus another 2x cubed, that's going to be nothing. Those should always cancel out if you're doing it right. Now what we got to do is subtract the other stuff. So now we're going to subtract 5x squared minus negative 3x squared. What's 5x squared minus a negative 3x squared? Well, if we're minusing a negative, that's the same as adding. So we're going to end up with 8x squared here. Okay, just like you did with long division, we're going to drop down the other term as well. Now we repeat the process. What do we get when we divide 8x squared by 2x? So we go 8x squared divided by 2x. 8 divided by 2 is 4. X squared divided by x is 4x. That's our next term we write up here. All right, now what we got to do is multiply back through. Multiply back through to both these things. So if we take 4x times 2x, we should get 8x squared. 4x times negative 3 is going to be negative 12x. Now we got a minus. What do we get when we minus both of these? So 8x squared minus 8x squared, that cancels out that 0. Negative 2x minus negative 12x. What is that going to equal? Negative 2x minus negative 12x. All right, again, we got minus a negative situation. That's the same as adding. So negative 2x plus 12x is 10x. Drop down the next number. Okay, repeat the process again. What are we going to get when we divide 10x by 2x? 10x divided by 2x is 5. So what we're going to have up here is plus 5. Repeat the process again. Multiply this back out 5 to both things here. So if we distribute, you're going to get 10x. And if you multiply 5 times negative 3, negative 15. Okay. Again, we got to subtract that. So if we subtract that, 10x minus 10x, that cancels out that 0. And then we got negative 15 minus a negative 15. Well, just like we've been doing with these other ones, if you got minus a negative, that's like adding. Negative 15 plus 15, we get 0. So that's our remainder. We got a remainder 0 on this one. So then we're done. This then is our answer right here. This is the polynomial you get for your answer. X squared plus 4x plus 5 is what's left over when you divide those two polynomials. Okay, that's called long division, polynomial long division. It's kind of a new thing, a little bit harder. Let's try a couple more here so you know what you're doing here on these. All right, next one. Let's divide this out. So same thing. We want to set up the problem with a division bar. So you got x plus 4 is what you're dividing by 2x cubed plus 6x plus 152 is what you're doing for your next one. Now, when you're writing these out, you're going to have to make sure that you have every degree of x accounted for. If not, you're going to run into problems later. So if we look at our what we're dividing by here, our first degree is 3, our second degree is 1, our last degree doesn't have an x, so that's degree 0. Looks like we don't have a 2, or a degree 2. We're missing that one. So if you're missing a degree 2, you need to account for that or write something here in your division bar, or it's not going to work out nice when you do your long division. So because that one's missing, that means the coefficient is 0. There's 0 x squareds in this polynomial. Then continue 6x plus 152. So if there's a missing degree, you got to write in a 0 so that we got something to subtract from later. All right, let's do that process again now. So we're going to take this and divide by x. What do we get when we do that? Well, 2x to the third divided by x, that's going to be 2x squared. Okay, multiply that polynomial then back to these other two. What do we get when we multiply those back? Well, one of them is going to be 2x cubed, and then you have to multiply to the next one here. So 2x squared times 4 is going to be 8x squared. Now we got to minus that. So those are going to equal 0, and then we got 0x squared minus 8x squared. That's going to be negative 8x squared. Drop the next one down. Okay, repeat the process. What are we going to get when we take negative 8x squared now divided by an x? We're going to get negative 8x. That's the next thing we write on top. Now we got to times this back to these other two. So if we multiply it back out, negative 8x squared, negative 8 times 4 is going to be negative 32x. We got to minus this. Those cancel out, those equal 0. Now we got 6x minus negative 32x. 6x minus negative 32x. That's a double slasher here, so it looks like it's going to equal 38x. Drop down the next term here. So again, you got to always remember, drop down the next one. Okay, repeat it again. So now what are we going to get when we take 38x divided by an x? Well, that's going to end up being 38. Okay, multiply back through. So if you multiply 38 to the x, you're going to get 38x. And if you multiply 38 times 4, that's going to be 152. Now we got to subtract that from the stuff above. So that's equal to, that cancels out. 152 minus 152 looks like, again, we end up with a remainder of 0. So if you got a remainder of 0, this one divides in perfectly. That's your solution right there. That would be the answer. We'll talk about what happens in a little bit here if you get a remainder, how you write it. All right, next problem. Number 6, we want to, again, do some polynomial division. So let's set it up and write it out again. What you're dividing by goes outside the division bar. What you're dividing goes inside. Now check again, do we have all the powers as or degrees or powers of x? 3, 2, 1, 0. Yep, they're all there. There's no missing one, so we can just write this out as is. If there's a missing one, like in the last one, remember, you got to write a 0 in for it so that it's going to work out. All right, let's go through and divide this one. Let's go on the first one here. Take 6x cubed divided by 3x. See what's left. If you divide that, that's going to be 2x squared. Now multiply that back through. So that needs to get multiplied to both of these. So if you multiply them to both, you're going to get 6x cubed plus 2x squared minus this. If you subtract it, that cancels out that 0. 5 minus 2 is going to be 3x squared. Drop down your next term. Repeat the process now. What's 3x squared divided by 3x? We're going to get just a single x left if we do that. Multiply that back through. So if you multiply back through, you're going to get 3x squared plus x. We got to subtract it. Those cancel. That equals 0. Negative 2x minus another x is going to be negative 3x. Drop the last term down. Okay, repeat the process again. What is negative 3x divided by 3x going to be? That's going to give us a negative 1. Multiply that negative 1 back through. Get negative 3x. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Subtract. Those equal 0. And then we got 1 minus negative 1, which is going to equal 2 because we got a double slash here. So this one did not divide in nicely. There is a remainder left over. Okay, so now we got to write out our answer. It's going to be what you had here with the remainder. So our answer on this one, when we're writing this out, is going to be the 2x squared plus x minus 1. And then we got to think back. What did we do on that other one? If there's a remainder, okay, you put the remainder over what you were dividing by. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing on this problem, just like you did way back in your, when you learned long division. So here our remainder is 2 over what we were dividing by over here was 3x plus 1. And that's how we'd write out the solution then. That would be the answer. This one did not divide in nice. All right, let's check out number 7. Long division again. So we want to set the problem up. Well, why don't you pause the video and see if you can set this one up and write it out. Don't solve it yet, just set it up and see if you do it right. Okay, let's check out how you did setting it up. 2x minus 3 is what we're dividing by. Let's check our power degrees or powers here. 4, 2, 1, 0. Do we have any missing? Yeah, I don't see 3 here. 3's not here. So then you got to put a 0, 1 in there. So if you did that, awesome. If not, make sure you do that or you're gonna run into problems later. So we got to write in a 0x cubed in there. All right. So that's what it sets up to be. All right, let's solve this one out now. So again, repeat that same process. Divide these out. What do you get when you take 4x to the 4th divided by 2x? Well, 4 divided by 2 is 2. X to the 4th divided by x is going to be x cubed. Multiply it back through to both. So you're going to get 4x to the 4th when you multiply those. If you multiply these two other ones, minus 6x cubed. All right, we got to subtract. That cancels out. That equals 0. 0 minus a negative 6 is going to be positive 6x cubed. Drop down the next one. Okay, continue the process now. So now we want to divide out, what is this, divided by 2x. So if you take 6x cubed divided by 2x, you're going to get 3, and then there would be 2 x's left over. Multiply it back through. Okay, subtract it. That's 0. You got negative 17x squared minus a negative 9x squared. Got a double slash. That's like adding. So we're going to be left with negative 8x squared. Drop down the next one. Okay, repeat it again. What's negative 8x squared divided by 2x? Well, negative divided by positive is going to be negative. 8 divided by 2 is 4. There'd be 1x left over. Multiply that back. Negative times the negative is going to be plus 12x. Now we got to subtract this. Those cancel out. 14 minus 12 is going to be 2x. We got one last term to drop down here. Repeat it one more time. 2x divided by 2x is 1. Whenever you divide something by itself, it's 1. Multiply that back. You got 2x minus 3. If we subtract that, looks like the remainder in this one comes out to be 0. And so this one, we got our answer here. Whenever it divides in nicely, that's just your answer right there. All right, one last problem. This one's talking about area of a rectangle. They say area of a rectangle is this. The length is 3x minus 4. What's the width? This is similar to that first book problem we did. Area equals length times width. Okay, they tell us the area, they tell us the length. We gotta solve for the width. So if we're solving for the width here, let's divide by the length. Looks like the width is equal to the area divided by the length. So we need to take this and divide by this. So it's just one of those problems we were just doing here. We got this one divided by this one. Let's set it up with a long division problem here. So you got 3x minus 4 divided by 3x squared minus 19x plus 20. Why don't you pause the video, see if you can divide this one out. You should end up with the remainder 0 if you're doing it correctly. So try it out on your own here, see what you get. All right, let's see. You did it correctly here. 3x divides into 3x squared. There'd be 1x left. If you multiply that out, you're going to get 3x squared minus 4x. We got to subtract that. That cancels out. If you take negative 19 minus a negative 4, minus negative is like adding 4x. So you should get negative 15x. Drop the next one down. Multiply or divide these out again. Take this divided by this. You're going to get minus 5. Multiply that back through. You're going to get negative 15x plus 20. If we subtract this, that cancels out. 20 minus 20 is 0. There's your answer. X minus 5 is the width. All right, try some of these out on the practice.